That's wow, what a scene! And we're coming up on October a year ago when Clif and George projected the beginning of what we are in now, and now more and more people are picking up on your work, my friend, and standing on this. Well, the first week of October is looking pretty bad for whatever, the last of September. Well, you know, they're not dumb, and if there is any watchword by which much of the Internet commerce and information is now being predicated upon, it is plagiarism. And
it works for a lot of people somehow.
It certainly does. We'll be right back. Our friend and I like to call him a colleague, but I'm not in his league. Clif,
I don't think that's the case at all. I'm very admiring of your work.
Well,
you predate my efforts in this strange arena of the universal squirreliness by, what, decades?
I don't know. It is squirrely, but deadly so, and
tree varmints of any kind are not nice to deal with, and we got a lot of them in Washington, D.C., and then we've got their keepers and handlers. They're the real nasties that we have to worry about.
All true. All right, so what's the data show? How are we doing? What's the latest report?
We crossed a timeline here that we, or not a timeline, a series of temporal markers that are in a stream of data. So as each one falls, it gives us greater confidence in the ones that are behind it, sort of like dominoes in a sense. And we had the earthquake on the 3rd. We had now have gotten data out about this just immensely horrific bond auction that occurred, or didn't occur really, recently, in which China showed up or didn't show up and didn't purchase. And as a result of which, I went and examined a bunch of the Chinese newspapers and came across some articles discussing the economic future of the U.S. in very grim terms at the top leadership levels in China, especially the people who are going to have to make financial decisions with all this money, bearing in mind China is now the richest country on the planet. They're of the opinion that the United States is not a safe bet at 7 years, so they're not going to buy 7-year notes. They're of the opinion it's not a safe bet at 5, 3, or 2 years. And that they'll right now only bet 1 year, and that past September the odds favor them, or their strategy is they'll drop to 30 and 90-day notes.
So they'll come in, but on their terms, on that basis. 30 and 90-day notes after September. Because
they feel that September will be the denouement or the outbreak of a real derivative crisis that has a lot of them worried. And they think that at that point it may bring the United States to such a state of unsettledness that they can't even really predict beyond 30 days that the government will be intact. And that's their issue. And it makes sense from their viewpoint, citing the data that they had looked at, and I can't say I disagree. This issue of the derivatives, much of which is tied to both interest rates and in another squirrely fashion back to things like soybean crops. Interest rates are not doing well because we're having to buy our own debt. We have hyperinflation that is just built into the system, and everybody knows it's going to break out. The only issue is when. And beyond that, we have a set of conditions that are causing massive crop failures in not only crops like the beans, which really refers to soybeans, but also in new wheat and old wheat crops are affected by this rust that's going around at just breakneck speed all around the planet. So we're about to reach a grains crisis. And a lot of people may say, well, you know, I don't eat cereal or grains aren't that important. But what they have to bear in mind is that that's the absolute rock bottom level of calories upon which our entire food chain is based. So we can get along to a certain extent without food out of the ocean, and that's breaking down as well. There hasn't been a natural oyster spawn on the West Coast in many regions, and also all around the planet now for a number of years. So oysters are dying off, and it's just endemic of everything else, a symptom of everything else that's going on. And so, getting back to the point, the food crisis will occur just about the same time, and is in fact occurring behind the scenes, as is the currency crisis relative to the Chinese. And you notice the dollar took a hit, and so on. And all these were temporal markers that we said, well, if this occurs, then this other thing is likely to occur, and so on and so forth. So I'm pretty sanguine that the prediction from about the August breakout in visibility, which is to say it'll hit the media about the derivative prices is probably pretty spot on. We have a window between the 16th and the 22nd, bearing in mind the 22nd is on a weekend, so likely it would be that Friday, which I think is the 21st. In any event, the derivatives crisis is going to spin everything else out of control over the rest of the last waning days of summer and into early fall, such that by October 25th, we reach a pretty serious level of frothing chaos that for 10 days is going to keep us all in quite suspense as to how it's all going to play out, which direction things are going to go. And it, unfortunately, the universe is putting all kinds of other weighted evidence and intelligent speculation behind our forecast, in the sense that we now have people coming out saying, like your previous guest, basically things are going to fall apart after the first part of October and the change of the fiscal year. We also have other respected forecasters like Bob Chapman, who analyzes data in an entirely different way, who's come to the conclusion that we're headed for bank holidays at the end of September, this kind of thing. Now, if those actually occur, we face a path in fall that goes from October 25th through about the 4th or 5th of November and presents us with three large possibilities. And what we may face is a combination of all three. It may be more weighted one way than the other. We just can't really say at this stage. Okay. But it appears that we're going to have to deal with a very severe flu crisis that will spawn a whole series of political problems. That's on one stream. Okay. Then on the other side, we may indeed have the Israelis decide that the economy of the globe is headed, and they might as well attack Iran now, before everything truly falls apart. Because at some point, they're basically being held back now, because if they were to attack, all the markets on the planet would just plummet down to nothing, and we'd have an economic depression that would affect even them. But if we have that depression anyway, they may feel less pressure. Makes sense?
Of course. The markets? Oh, everything's great.
Yeah, and then we have the other nasty bit, which is the idea that maybe somebody's going to generate a war. Yeah, either through a false flag or a deliberate attack or so on.
Sure. All right, hold on. I'll be right back. Yes, the Dow Jones at 9,320, up 33 points on the day. Everything's fine, folks. Headed toward 10,000.
Yeah, prosperity.
What are these people smoking? Boy, I just love watching that Dow Jones go up. What's it that, nothing like the smell of the Dow going up in the morning. How does that go? Oh, never mind. 71.56 for crude oil.
Yeah, that gives you a clue there.
Yes, it does.
And the rise in gold, and as much as they're beating it down and attempting to play paper games.
They've held it to 965. They're really working hard.
Yeah.
Let's go over those 3 points again.
We're looking at a mixture, likely, of a disease issue at a severe scale.
Excuse me, but what is the data, Cliff? What is the data saying about that? What's the verbiage? Now, there's subjective interpretation, but you know what you're about after all these years, 10 years plus.
We're looking at a combined impact on the order of millions of deaths here in the U.S. Now, our real problem is that we have confidence at the higher archetype levels, and usually we discount all numbers that come through simply because the Internet is full of them, unless they happen to make it through our rather torturous processing.
And these numbers do? And these numbers do?
And these numbers do, correct.
Oh, my.
The 2.2 million is the impact over the immediate future. By that might be 6 months, 7 months, beginning probably in November. It really depends. We're not sure, for instance, of a number of things within our forecasting methodology. We sometimes get just incredibly accurate hits, and then the same strength and confidence on some